people are beginning to realize that they don't have to wait for that. They can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or they can learn and change in a state of joy or inspiration. So, is there a connection between our authentic self and the soul, and how do we get there? Well, I think for most of us then, we begin to, we're young and we have a lot of confusing things that happen to us in our life, and when we're young, most of our attention is on our inner world. And as we begin to grow up and we meet friends and we move to different places and we own different things, we become very consumed with the external environment. And we begin to create an identity by the people we know and the places we go and the things we do. And all of our attention goes to the external environment, and we don't want to pay a lot of attention to our inner world. So that works probably for the first 35 or 40 years of our life. And then after you experience everything that life has to offer, all of a sudden nothing's making that feeling go away. And this is the moment the soul begins to wake us up and say, pay attention, because nothing is making that feeling change. So in other words, when you can predict the feeling of everything that's going on in your life, and nothing new is happening, all of a sudden you're left with those feelings from very early on, whether it's emptiness or unworthiness or insecurity. And so then this is where people all of a sudden have to make a choice. Some people, they buy the sports car, they buy the new boat, they join the new social club, they meet new people, they have affairs, they go on vacation to a new place, they buy new things. But when the novelty of all of those events wear off, here comes that feeling again. And so then other people, they begin to look at those emotions and they don't want to keep that facade going on any longer. In other words, this is how we appear to the world. This is the facade, this is the identity, this is the image, and this is how we really feel inside. Now this person is identifying, creating an identity with the external world so that nobody knows how they really feel inside. Now everybody's doing the same exact thing. So God forbid anybody finds out that we're insecure or feeling empty. So you have to keep this facade going on with your identity in the environment and your body and the way you look and how busy you are, so that you don't have to look at this. Now some people begin to look at this feeling, and this is the midlife crisis. This is where they say, I don't love you, I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't like those people, I don't want to keep this going any longer anymore. And they begin to pay attention to this feeling. Now there's not a lot of structure in our Western world to do that. So the moment people begin to lose their mind and they begin to tell the truth about who they are, they begin to break their emotional bonds with everybody in their life. That's when they go to the doctor and get Prozac, and there they go, they return right back to that person. But this gap between how we appear to the world and who we really are inside is based on the amount of emotions that we've memorized from past experiences. Now, when we begin, there's pain there, there's sadness there, there's unworthiness there, there's insecurity there, and we're not looking for the external environment to make this feeling go away. In other words, we start looking at how we think when we feel this way, how we act when we feel this way, and we begin to move through those emotions, and we begin to overcome them. Every time we overcome an emotion, we liberate energy, and we begin to close the gap between how we appear to the world and who we are inside, until how we appear is who we are, and we've liberated all this energy. That's the moment we call transparency, and that's the moment where the person is truly happy, no longer needing anything outside of them to make them happy, but the true happiness is coming from within them. In other words, so many people confuse pleasure and happiness. And pleasure is the accumulation of things to feel good, and happiness is coming from within. So that intelligence that's giving us life right now, that's digesting our food and organizing trillions of functions in one cell every single second and organizing DNA, that self-organizing intelligence is looking for a crack to leak out. And when it begins to leak out, it begins to consume us. And that's the moment we become like it. We become more loving. It's a loving intelligence. We become more mindful. It's a great mind. We become more willful. It's got an amazing will. Its nature becomes our nature. We become more giving. It's a giver of life. So I think when we begin to all of a sudden realize that there's nothing wrong with the accumulation of things, but I think we've been conditioned into believing that true happiness, changing everything in our external world, and true change comes from trying to do it from the outside instead of doing it from within. And I think this is, again, really important for us, because as we begin to overcome that, those limited states, the body's no longer living in the past, and that's where most of our pain comes from, is when the body's living in the past. And we've measured so many people in the process of transformation, and when they get beyond their past, they're pretty unlimited people, and the side effect of that is true joy and true expression of life, which I call the natural state of being. So when people are living in this gap between how they appear to the world and how they really feeling, they don't want to look at this emotion because it is painful. What they'd rather do is distract themselves from all these things in their external environment so they don't have to look. But when that feeling isn't going away, and they can't, after the sports car and after the the vacation and after the buying the new things, a new wardrobe, the facelift, whatever, and this feeling keeps returning, this is a time really where they have to look at that emotion. And they have to, as you said, you have to be in the presence of that emotion and ask some fundamental questions. Are these emotions driving my thoughts? How do I think when I feel this way? Now, those thoughts are just old circuits that have been fired and wired in the brain. How do I behave? What do I do? How do I act? What do I say? What comes out of my mouth? Now think about this. If you can observe how you're thinking, notice how you're acting, and pay attention to how you're feeling, the moment you become conscious of what you're unconscious to, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program, and this is when we begin to objectify our subjective selves. And the more we can look at ourselves through the eyes of someone else, the more conscious we can become of that, the less unconscious we're prone to be in our normal life. So the word meditation, the symbol of meditation in the Tibetan language, literally means to become familiar with. So if you're becoming familiar with your unconscious thoughts and making them conscious, you're in a process of meditation. If you're becoming aware of your automatic habits and behaviors, and now you're so aware of them you would never become unaware of them again, and you look at those emotions that bring you to a lower level, and you're so familiar with your pain and your sorrow and your suffering that you would never allow yourself to live in that emotional state again. This is the moment you're Gandalf on the bridge and you're saying, you may not pass ever again. Now, when you make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional addiction in your body, and your body begins to respond to a new mind, that's the moment the past no longer exists in your body. That's the moment you come out of your resting state, yes, and your body is getting a sampling of the future instead of living by the memory of the past. Now, think about this. How can a person in the deep south of the United States move into a state of religious ecstasy and drink strychnine and have no biological effects? How can the mother who has her child caught under the car make the decision to lift that car up and pull the child out? The mother doesn't say, hey, I had carbohydrates today and I haven't worked out in 2 weeks. She doesn't think like that. The decision is final, and the choice carries an amplitude of energy that becomes an experience that she never forgets, and that's the moment she is no longer her biology, she's no longer her body, she's no longer associated with her identity and her environment, and she is transcendent of time. So in order for us to truly change who we are, we have to begin to come out of our resting state and begin to teach the body emotionally what the future is going to feel like. Now, let me just explain this. So most people say they want abundance, but they really don't want abundance. What they really want is freedom. Some people say they want a new relationship, but they really don't want a new relationship. They want to feel and give love. Some people want success because they want to feel empowerment. They want the mystical moment to feel awe. They want a healing to feel wholeness. Now, they'll wait for the experience to happen to feel that emotion. But that's the Newtonian model of reality, of cause and effect, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And when we feel better inside of us, we pay attention to whoever or whatever caused that, cause and effect. The quantum model of reality is about causing an effect, which means you have to teach your body emotionally what empowerment feels like before your success. You have to be whole before your healing. You have to be in awe before the mystical moment. You have to feel freedom and abundance before your wealth appears. And when we do that, then to the materialist it would seem really insane or foolhardy because the event hasn't happened. But to the quantum mind, though, the body is getting a sampling of the future before the experience occurs. And if we do this properly and we marry it with a clear intention, the body begins to believe it's in the future instead of in the past. And now we're defined by a vision of the future instead of a memory of the past. And so we teach people how to come out of their resting state. Unfortunately, as I said, most people wait for the crisis to come out of their resting state and where they say this is enough. But everybody already knows how to do this, because everybody that's on this call has already done something great in their life. And what did they do? They made a decision. They had a vision. They got inspired by that vision. They decided what thoughts would support them to that vision, what behaviors and choices they were going to make. They felt enthusiastic, and they began to get their behaviors to match their intention, and they changed. Now think about it when we set out to do something and we didn't accomplish it. We got lazy, we had a vision, we got emotional, we got too busy, stress got in the way, we had social appointments, and we traded that vision for mediocrity. So we come out of our resting state and the body has to be energized with a new frequency. And we were capturing in our last workshop probably 40,000 times the amount of energy in people's brains when they did this. Now, 40,000 times the amount of energy, give you an idea. When people's brains are firing in normal, limited consciousness, we're about 10 to 60 microvolts squared of energy. We're talking about 1 million microvolts of energy in a person's brain. I mean, you can charge your iPhone with that. That is how powerful we really are. So then, as we begin to overcome and overcome and overcome those limitations that block the flow of the divine in us, as we begin to remove those layers, we begin to feel connected to something greater. And then the next challenge appears, because there's no schools of ancient wisdom in the Himalayas that you come. So when we begin to get our mind and body right, and we begin to look at what piece of knowledge could we apply to this adversity to change something about ourselves, to get closer to source, I think that when people really begin to realize that there's no structure out there, yeah, there's structure for drugs, there's structure for alcohol, there's structure for gambling, there's structure for video gaming or overeating or shopping or all of consumerism. You take a pill and it makes that feeling go away immediately. You're going to correlate that internal change with whatever you did to take that, and you're going to develop an attachment or an addiction. And what that does is it begins to broaden the gap. And you could be the wealthiest, the most successful, the most popular person, the most good-looking person in the world, but if you haven't overcome that emotion right there, you haven't evolved in one lifetime. And this is where we have to begin to look at where we're going to make the biggest contribution to ourselves, because as we begin to understand that the soul cannot create a future experience, and the soul wants to really have new events and novel experiences, if you're living by the same emotion every single day and you're anchored emotionally in your past and your body's been conditioned emotionally to be in the past, then until you overcome that emotion, the soul can't get on with creating anything new, because for the most part, you're bound to a past experience. So when we begin to overcome the emotions, then we're literally pulling our mind out of the past, and that's when we begin to create a new future. Staying conscious and staying aware and staying present
is an art, because you know when someone's present with you in your life because they're paying attention to you. You know when they're not present with you because they're not paying attention to you. So imagine this field of information, this intelligence that lives within you and I that's governing everything material in this world. It's a self-organizing intelligence. You have access to it, so you better get present with it as well as you can get present with anything else. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right. That realm you can't experience with your senses. You can only experience with your awareness. So then people have to take their attention off their bodies and go from a somebody to a nobody. Take their attention off the people in their life and go from that they identify with and go from a someone to a no one. Take their attention off the things in their life, their cell phone, their computer, their car, and go from something to nothing. Take their attention off where they sleep, where they work, where they're sitting, and go from somewhere to nowhere. Take their attention off the predictable future and the familiar past and time, and go from sometime to no time. And now if you're taking all of your attention off of everything material in this three-dimensional reality, now there's only one other thing that's left. That means you're an awareness, your consciousness. And now that is the bridge, that is the door to the quantum field, and you can't enter the quantum field as a somebody. So if someone has spent their whole life working on having the perfect body, or so much so they have so much attention on their pain, where you place your attention is where you place your energy, it's going to take some work for them to take all of their attention off their body, right? Because they'll do it and then they'll go back, let's see if the pain's still there. Oh, the pain's still there. So it's a little bit of a waltz in the beginning, but as people start applying this, you start getting better at it. As an example, we had Bond University, university in Australia on the Gold Coast. Senior researcher took the large majority of my brain scans, and she had them analyzed by her graduate students, and they statistically looked at everything. One of the most startling things for the research team was our community's ability to get to that point where they're nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time. And I'm talking 4 seconds. I'm talking 5 seconds. I'm talking 9 seconds. Just give me a second. I know how to do this. They've practiced it enough times that the creative moment is when you get beyond yourself, when you dissociate from everything known in your material world. Turns out when you do that and you start changing your brainwaves slow down into alpha and theta, you're suppressing the memory bank of the known self that keeps you plugged into three-dimensional reality. When you quiet down this mechanism, now all of a sudden you start connecting to that field. And when you can stay conscious in those subconscious realms, when you can literally regulate and change brainwaves, now you're in the operating system where you can make those significant changes. So we now know that when people apply the formula and they do that properly, now they're walking through that door where they're ready to create from. In other words, you can't create from the known. You can't create with your body. That's matter trying to change matter. And you can do it, it's just going to take a long time. Right. But when you create from the field instead of from matter, there's a whole different set of dynamics that takes place. And why not push that envelope to see, okay, if we've done this, is it possible to do this? As an example, we do these wonderful healing circles where you see these dramatic instantaneous changes. So the person who's healed themselves of some health condition, when it comes time to heal somebody else, they're going to say, well, now I understand the science, I understand how this all works, I know how to get beyond myself, I know how to open my heart. They start piecing it all together. Let's take the formula to the next level. Now they witness a significant change in a person's body in real time, right there. So then the next question is, okay, like this happened many times. As an example, the woman who was at the event in Mallorca, Spain, her brother had a massive stroke in Colombia, and she went back to Colombia, and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. She called up the healing circle and said, hey, can we do a healing on my brother? Now, if you're playing by the rules of Newtonian physics, three-dimensional reality, you're going to say, well, you need to be in front of the guy in order to heal him. But if you understand there's no separation in the quantum, that everything's connected when you're in that place, so wouldn't that be the next application of the formula? So they go over the science, they get it. Okay, we just need a picture of him, and that's our coordinate. And if we're in the field,
sending a frequency to that coordinate.
Yeah, but you're not sending it anywhere because there's nowhere to send. There's no space and time there. You're connecting to it, exactly. That's a great way to say it. In 1 hour, after that coherence healing, he comes back to consciousness.
Wow.
Now, that's the extension of where we're going. You see, now we're progressing. A woman who was in one coherence healing group was a pediatric nurse in Children's Hospital in Seattle, and again witnessed the amazing miracle after our event in Toronto. She comes back, and there's a little, they call them friends, there's a little guy failing. Doctors hit him with the paddles, they use all the drugs to bring him back, and they walk out of the room, and they say, we lost him. She walks over, puts her hands right in the field, and this kid comes right back online. Wow. Doctors are like, what was that? And now, so we have a lot of our interest now is, I want to get 50%. 1 out of 2 people, we're collecting the data in this coherence healings. When we're 50%, we're going to walk into a children's hospital. We have 3 children's hospitals right now that are interested in us. We'll show them the data. We'll show them the results. We'll say we don't want any money. We'll never even touch the kids. All we want to do is just change their lives. And when we're 50%, we're going to start doing it in children's hospitals. And again, every time I have a mystical moment and I feel that transcendental love that I don't even know the word for, every time I have one of those moments, I think I got this all wrong. It's just that it is not chemical; it's electric. And
you got what all wrong?
Well, the way we view the world, the way we we don't see things how they are; we see things how we are. You know, and every inner experience that's transcendental experience enriches circuitry in your brain. Experience produces emotion or energy in the body. So you start having transcendental moments where you start connecting to that field. Its signature is love. But not love like a love for your puppy. This is like an arousal. This is, I don't know the other word, but bliss.
Spiritual arousal.
So yeah, and we have the evidence. We can say, oh, watch this person's brain. And scientists are studying our work. I'll say, oh, watch, she's going to pop in a few minutes. What do you mean? Just watch, she's going to pop. And all of a sudden, this person goes into an arousal. The sympathetic nervous system is so switched on, but the arousal isn't like an arousal from the environment that produces anger or aggression or fear, or anxiety or pain or suffering. That's survival in the environment that produces the arousal. This arousal is coming from energy in the body that's moving up into the brain, and the arousal is bliss. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is
freedom, peace.
Oof, yeah. But it's not chemical. It's you'll feel it in every single cell in your body. Now here's the outcome of that. The outcome of that is that when you open your eyes and some conditioning, some layer has been removed, your spectrum of the way the world looks broadens now, because now you're wired to perceive what's always existed, but you didn't have the circuits in place to perceive them. So then it's the inner experience that literally transforms our experience of the outer world. And so when you start having moments where you hit that kind of frequency, or you have those moments of love, you're less dependent on anyone to bring you happiness. Yeah. You're okay. You can love the person for their flaws, because you can see a part of yourself you used to be that you no longer are. And instead of judgment, you have compassion, and you can encourage and communicate from a level of connection instead of intimidation or competition, or however relationships work. So I do think that it's energy and vibration, and I think that in our community, at least, people who have relationships that are built from our community tend to be more long-lasting, because they're more self-aware. Yeah. And so there's no blame, there's no excuses, there's no make wrong, there's no competition, there's none of that. There's just, this is who I am, you know. And I think that the ultimate goal is when you reach the point in your life when how you appear to the world is who you really are. That level of transparency it takes no effort. Right. You can be yourself, and you know, people say to me, wow, you're pretty approachable. And I say, well, God, I work so hard every day on overcoming myself in the morning, overcoming my ego. Yeah. Why would I want to build it up the next day? Because I got to face that guy again tomorrow morning. So why not just keep, you know, taking those edges and smoothing them down, so that you're less unconscious to all of those programs that are built in relationships.